Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen, welcome back to Sunday morning in the old cookbook show. Today we're going to do a recipe out of this cookbook. This is The Accomplished Cook by Robert May. This was originally published in England in 1660. My copy, this very book, was published in 1685. So this cookbook that I hold in my hand is 336 years old. It's in remarkably good condition for a book that age. And so the recipe we're going to do is called To Make a Dish of Rice, Flour, and Cream. And I'm going to read it all the way through. A little bit difficult to read because the grammar is different in 1685 and the alphabet is different in 1685. Take a ½ pound of rice, dust it and pick it clean, then wash it, dry it, lay it abroad in a dish as thin as you can, or dry it in a temperate oven. Being well dried, rub it and beat it in a mortar till it be as fine as flour. Then take a pint of good thick cream, the whites of 3 new laid eggs, well beaten together, and a little rose water. Set it on a soft fire and boil it till it be very thick. Then put it in a platter and let it stand till it be cold. Then slice it out like a leech. Cast some biscuit upon it, and so serve it. So I'm going to start out, I've already dusted, washed, and dried this rice. So I'm going to put it into a mortar and pestle, and we're going to start crushing it and see if I can get it as fine as flour. Now, first thing that a lot of people are going to say to me is, you're using white rice. This is the 1600s, you should be using brown rice or whole rice. And my answer to that is no. In the 1600s, white rice was the rice that you would find in England. Since the dawn of time, when people started growing rice and then selling rice and shipping it abroad, they realized that removing the hull and polishing it a little bit meant that it wasn't going to go bad. So for their own use, it meant that they'd get more food value because they weren't wasting any food to rotting and spoilage, but also that they could sell it farther and farther afield, that it shipped really well because it wasn't going to spoil. And so when this book was first written in the 1660s, they definitely would have been using white rice that would have come from the Mediterranean, or pretty far away from England anyway. And Robert May was born into servitude. He served in a very large English household. And when he was very young, the lady of the house sent him to France to learn the latest in French cooking techniques. And so this book is filled with French cooking techniques that he's brought back to England to serve in the very biggest houses. And when he first wrote this book in 1660, rice was still a commodity. It wasn't even a commodity. It was something that only the richest households could afford. And so this dish would have been a very prized dish in 1664. By the time my book is published in 1685, rice was just about to make a giant leap in the opposite direction. Rice production was just starting up in earnest in the colonies, in the Carolinas, and I need to keep grinding because I'll never get through this if I don't keep grinding and tell the story at the same time. And so yes, rice production is just about to boom in the late 1600s, 1680s in the Carolinas. The plantation owners have found a new kind of rice that grows extremely well in the temperate zones, the lowland zones of the Carolinas. And rice becomes something that is incredibly cheap. This combination of the right growing conditions, the right rice, there's no way around it, slavery, creates something in rice that is so incredibly inexpensive. And there's so much rice flowing through the United Kingdom, through England. All the rice grown in the colonies has to go to England first to be taxed before it can be sold on to other markets in Europe. There's so much rice floating around that it goes from being something that only the richest households can afford to being used as cattle feed. And also, subsequently, those households that are at the lower end of the socioeconomic strata start using it because it is so cheap. They're feeding it to cattle. People that are really poor are eating it. And so that's a shift in this book. But these recipes, these rice recipes, still remain in this book because they were being served in these big, big houses at least until the early 1700s. And I think that's when it starts to taper off because there is so much of it. It's no longer something special. They move on to some other ingredient. Okay, done with that. This is not the Townsends or some historical recreation. No one's got time to watch me spend the next 10 hours trying to grind this rice to a flour. Yeah, 15 seconds. That's much better. Okay, so this goes into a pot over a slow fire. And to that, I'm supposed to add some of our finest cream. So I've got some cream here, 1 pint. In goes the cream. The egg whites that I've forked up a little bit here, so in they go. And a touch of rose water. I don't really like rose water. I find that it can be incredibly overpowering, but it is so much better than some of the other flavorings that are used in this book, like, say, ambergris or musk. Musk is another one that shows up in a lot of recipes. So ambergris and musk in a recipe, not that great in my mind. And this is 1685, so it's before, and I have to be very careful about how I say this. Europeans knew about vanilla at this point. They knew about vanilla that grew in the area that we would now call Mexico. They had discovered it. They figured it out. But they hadn't figured out how to grow it commercially. It could not be cultivated. They didn't know how to replicate the process of pollinating the flower to get the bean. So they couldn't grow it commercially, and they couldn't export the plants to other places to grow it commercially. That doesn't happen until much, much later. So there is no vanilla in this cookbook at all. But surprisingly, there are a couple of New World discoveries that are in this book. There's a recipe that includes potatoes. I believe it's the first cookbook that includes potatoes. And there's also a recipe in there for turkey. Turkey is another New World discovery that makes it into this cookbook. So I'm supposed to stir this, bring it to a boil, and wait for it to thicken. So let's see how long that takes. I switched to a whisk partway through, and this has become extremely thick. Okay, it's so thick now it's pulling away from the bottom of the pot. I fear that if I cook it any longer, it will be far too much. So, into this dish, and then I'm going to cheat. I'm going to stick it in the fridge. Since I have that option, I can chill it down fairly quickly. I mean, it smells like rice pudding. It smells like you would expect rice pudding to smell. I don't expect that it's really going to be sweet, although it will be a little bit sweet from the cream, I suppose. So,
hey friends! Hey Glen!
I cheated a little bit.
Okay.
In 1685, they didn't have refrigerators, but
Oh, yeah, that would be cheating.
in the houses where this book was in use, they would have had ice houses. They definitely would have had ice houses. So now I'm supposed to. Let's read this because I want to make sure I get it right. Let it stand till it be cold. It's cold.
It would be cold.
Then slice it out like a leech.
Like a leech?
Cast some biscuit upon it, and so serve it. I don't know what they mean by a leech. I know that in this
Okay, I feel like I need a fork, but I'm not sure.
in this time period they did use leeches for medical uses, and I imagine when the leech had done its thing, the doctor would
You just pull it off? Like, okay, so...
Or would they slice it up?
I've seen this before when people just pull leeches off, and it can leave quite a significant hole.
That's why you would call a doctor and slice it off, I guess.
I guess so.
So I'm maybe not going to slice it with the amount of flair that
You're supposed to?
that I'm supposed
the drama?
to. Yes.
Okay, and you just cast the biscuits on it?
Julie, look at that.
That's like really gooey. Oh, maybe that's what they mean because it's kind of gooey. You could almost roll it into a little ball. Here, let me help you out there.
Thank you.
I'll give you 4.
Okay.
How many biscuits do I cast?
Yes.
Want it.
Exactly. So
I love the language, right? Because it just feels dramatic to you and I, but it was just the language.
it was just the way things were said. Okay.
All right, so I've got a little bit of whatever this white stuff is and some biscuit, sorry.
Okay. So cast yourself back. 1685, you're at the giant manor house. You've been out on a shoot all day or a hunt. And
Okay.
you've come back to have this wonderful laid out meal. And this is served as one of the courses. You'd also probably be hammered. Because
I think you might need to be.
you drank all day.
So this is a pretty flavorless concoction that is creamy in texture,
Yeah.
but I think it needs more biscuits because it's pretty,
There's no
pretty
sugar.
bland.
There's absolutely no sugar.
that's what the biscuits are for then.
That's probably what the biscuits are for.
Need more
I
biscuit.
would think that honey in this time period would have been used to sweeten it, but when you look at desserts in here, they really weren't sweet at all. But it is pretty pasty, isn't it?
It's pretty flavorless. Mm-hmm. I think maybe some fruit. I don't know. I
wouldn't make it again.
no.
No. But I can see how the evolution of rice pudding comes from here. Because we did that rice pudding and guts from this book, and that wasn't great either, but it's how the whole thing goes together. So you put some sugar in this, you put some fruit on top. It would probably be pretty good.
The fruit would help.
The fruit would help.
But really, you're just having fruit and the cookies, and then
Yeah.
this is just there.
Okay, not a winner. No. Some things need to stay in 1685. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.